righty, we're good. Microphone's on. Well, welcome everyone to our board meeting for Monday, November the 14th. I call this meeting to order. Mr. Bertram, would you call roll, please?
Mr. Moore.
Here.
Mrs. Schreiber.
Here.
Mrs. Stewart.
Here.
Mrs. Mulligan.
Here.
Dr. Urso.
Here. Would you stand, please, for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? All
Was
right.
that second, Anita?
No.
Kathy.
Kathy, okay.
No questions, Mr. Bertram, we're ready.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber.
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart.
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan.
Yes.
Dr. Urso.
Yes. Consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, highlights from tonight's consent agenda?
No.
Any donations? I was looking to see.
No donations.
No donations. And so if there is nothing, Mr. Bertram.
Mrs. Schreiber.
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart.
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan.
Yes.
Dr. Urso.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Moving right along to Personnel Agenda B, under Human Resources. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
Any questions regarding this? I believe a certain URSO is included within that agenda item. Is that correct? All right. If there is nothing, Mr. Bertram.
Mrs. Stewart.
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan.
Yes.
Dr. Urso.
Abstain?
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
And Mrs. Schreiber.
Yes.
We got done quick so we can get the main event for tonight, the 5-year forecast. And so, Mr. Bertram, I notice this is an action item. Do we move on this?
Do the motion in a second.
All right. Is there a motion for the 5-year forecast?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All right. Then, Mr. Bertram, the microphone is yours.
No further. All right. Hope everyone's smiling tonight. If you're not, you will be. All right, for the November forecast. Here we go. All right. Forecast overview. If I'm in your way.
That's okay.
Can you see either one, Todd?
Yeah, that's fine.
And I did give you a copy at your desk if you want to take notes and you can't see it all the way up here. Just to let you know, we started the fiscal year just over $20,032,267 as our carryover balance. The 2023 forecast, this fiscal year, we're showing $80,207,341 in revenue. That's good revenue for us. Forecasted expenses, $77,389,603. Right there, you're going to see a surplus. Ending cash balance is estimated at $22,850,005. All right. Just simplified financial statement. I'm just going to go over it real quick, and then we'll dive into some of the particulars a little bit. We've got fiscal year 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 on the board. We are generating substantial revenue throughout this forecast because I did include for the next biennium budget fair funding. If you recall, I left it out, not sure what the state was going to do. A lot of talk behind the scenes about would it continue or not continue. We truly believe it is going to continue, especially after the election. Governor has publicly announced that he's all for fair funding, so we believe we'll see the second third of the 6-year phase-in for the biennium budget. With that said, you're going to see revenue jumping from $80.2 million this year to $94.3 million, $104.2 million, $105.7 million, $107.5 million. Now, I did not include the fair funding, the phase 3, which would be the third biennium, for 26 and 27, but I did increase those numbers by approximately 2%. Again, let's wait and see how they're gonna do, what's gonna happen. You know, again, feel good that our governor is in support of this. He's there the next 4 years. Let's hope phase 3 hits us. Once we know for sure, it'll be included at that time. Expenditures. Expenditures are going up as well. Obviously, we've had some economic conditions out there. I've talked about healthcare a little bit. Healthcare is a fine example where our increases are 17.9% starting in January for this next year. We've heard that carriers are going to be requesting 50% or more for the next couple years. I'll dive into that a little deeper. But I also put some increases in our supplies, materials, purchase services. You know, I'm making sure that we do have enough forecasted to cover any increases that we're going to see due to inflationary pressures that are out there. So you will see on this schedule that we do have revenue surplus in the first 4 years of this forecast. 5th year, again, you don't need to worry about years 4 and 5 all that much, but there is a deficit of about $2.7 million in the 5th year of this forecast. Lots going to change between now and then. So ending cash balance, here's the happy news. I mentioned $22.8 million this year. That could increase as high as $46.25 million by the 4th year, 2026, and then maybe we start drawing down on that a little bit in 2027. All good news so far. Current year, revenues, 52% is coming in from our state sources, from our state aid. Property tax coming in at 5%. Federal sources, just a snippet, about 1.5%. Local sources, our taxpayers contribute 39% of our revenue. And then other sources, about 3 1/3%. Looking at the forecasted general fund revenue, nice color chart. Yeah, I printed all those in color. In the blues are local sources, and that remains pretty steady from $31 to $36 million through the course of the forecast. Will the economy affect that? I'm sure it will. One way or the other, we're going to see a little swing there, but nothing major, nothing I'm concerned about. The orange color is our state sources. This year, we're estimating $41.4 million. Jumping to $53.4 million next year, biennium budget. I know that's a big chunk, that's $12 million we should see in fair funding. And big reason for that is because of our poverty. They delayed that poverty payment to the districts, gave us a minimal amount the first 2 years, and then in the first year of the biennium, they're making all that up and getting it back on schedule, the 3rd each year, or 1/6 of it each year, a 1/3 for each biennium. So we see about $4 million in that poverty aid coming in starting 2024. Then again, we'll see another bump in that state aid to $62 million, which is $8 million more in 2025. And then I tapered it off at 2% increases for year 26, 27. And then we had a little money from intermediate, federal, and property tax reimbursements as well. All right, here's where we talk about the state aid a little more detail. 2020 and 2021, we saw about the same amount each of those 2 years. And then the first year of it, it dropped by $6 million. If you recall, it's because of the direct payments for any state aid going to the entities that are educating the students. Where it dropped about $6 million here, we had expenditures drop by $8 million. That was the offset. Your revenue drops, but your expenditures will drop also. In our case, we were plus $2 million in that first year of the biennium. 2022. Second year, here's where we see that $12 million increase. The blue that you're looking at here is the unrestricted money. The orange is the restricted money. I mentioned that poverty aid. 2023, it's about $6.7 million. It jumps to 10.8. That's where they start catching up for the prior 2 years where they weren't fully allocating those dollars.
Why weren't they fully allocating this?
I think it was a compromise, just some horse dealing going on, where they wanted to fund it, but not everybody did, so they held off on that a little bit because it was very expensive.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But it's okay, luckily we didn't have to borrow to make up for it, in good shape. And chart over here is the year-over-year changes here. You can see where we dropped quite a bit. 6 million, when you take the two together, you net that out. But now we're jumping by 7 million, 12 million, and then another $8.5, $9 million moving out into the fourth year of the biennium payments. So state aid is our lion's share. Total annual revenues, pretty picture here, 2020 and 2021, relatively flat at 77 million, 78 million each of those 2 years. And we saw the drop down to 72 million this year, up over 80 million, moving to 94.4, 104, 105, and 107 million in the last 3 years. Yeah, we're gonna be a $100 million district. A lot of money, yes. And I've got the year-over-year changes there where you can see 2023 we're up 8 million, then it jumps to 14 million in year 2024, another 10 million in 2025, and I flatlined it for 26, 27, a 2% increase. And if you want it broken down by each line item on the forecast, there it is for you. I won't go into detail on that, but you've got the numbers in front of you if you want to study it and quiz me on it later. Total revenue year-over-year change. I already talked about that as well, and this does it by line item as well, so you can see the difference in each category of revenue that we do receive. Any questions on revenue?
I guess, is there anything I could change? I could change these figures. I know it paints an optimistic picture. Thrilled about that. But I always try to temper that with, are there things out there that theoretically, if we would look back historically, 5, 10, 15 years at our forecasts, are there any things that,
I would say something drastic would have to happen to the economy between now and the end of June for this not to go through. Ohio's been doing very well in comparison to the nation and what's going on as far as state revenues and expenditures. We're still coming in over estimates from the state level. I still, so therefore, I feel very good that we're going to see our fair funding increase. Not to say it couldn't change, something could scare the bejeebus out of the state legislators and they make a change, and if they do, that's what the May forecast is for. I'm optimistic. I was like you, Chris, when I first looked at this, I couldn't believe it. I actually had to shut down, go home that night, come back, look at it again. I was like, wow, am I seeing what I'm seeing? In the second biennium, I'll let Marlon speak of this, if you will, Marlon, about the backpack information that they're talking about.
I think future legislation definitely can jeopardize the forecast for any school district in the state of Ohio. One piece of legislation that I think we can give the board a synopsis on in the coming communication would be around the backpack bill. We've heard us talk a lot about vouchers and things of that nature here with the board. Backpack bill is just a new effort to really shift away from calling it vouchers to the idea of money following a child where they choose to be educated at. So there is some conversation at the state level, no doubt about it, around a backpack bill. A lot of dialogue around pushing that through in the past. Didn't get any traction, but there still are some state legislators who definitely have a big heart and a big interest in pushing that to the finish line. I think an assumption or a prediction or an assumption would be that if the backpack bill does gain some traction, that you'll have to see some type of compromise between the fair school funding model as it currently sits or any type of potential changes with the different studies and categoricals and the impact of a backpack bill, right? Both can't dominate. There's got to be some type of compromise, all to be determined.
And therefore, that's why I'm not comfortable modeling that in the last 2 years of this forecast, because of some of that rhetoric that is going on at the moment.
my second question was around, I know we have some some nice businesses in Middletown, Cleveland Cliffs, NTE, various hospitals, et cetera. Is an understanding that we're considered a poverty district, is that by our student demographic profile? And I know a couple years ago, you indicated that NTE was going to possibly impact some of those things. Has that changed at all? Are we still?
I will say last time that we studied the school lunch program, and that's where it's determined, kids used to have to come in and fill out to qualify for either a reduced lunch price or 100% free and reduced lunch. But once you got to 70% of kids qualifying, we then qualified for a program that made us 100% free and reduced.
Mm-hmm.
When food service looked at that 2 years ago, our funding was cut a little bit because our numbers did drop, but we're still over that 70%. We weren't in the upper 80s, low 90s, wherever we were at the first time that we qualified for that. We were more in the mid 70s. There was concern, and that's probably a conversation that I did have at one point, that we may not be 100% free and reduced in the future. That's when the economy is really ripping good. People were out getting jobs. It was pre-pandemic. I would say I'm not so concerned about that when we qualify again and then again. Good question.
Had a question. While we're looking at those increases, the orange, I believe, is what you were referring to. While the numbers look very promising, you mentioned unrestricted or restricted funds. Within that increase, has the state, within the biennium, incentivized certain spending that they would like to see used with those increases? Are there categories of spending that they're focusing on within districts?
Yeah, the orange in this case is the restricted funding. We qualify. We have no problem spending the money on what is required of that restricted funding. We just have to code it and make sure that we report it correctly. That's 20% of our funding. I don't know that it's quite that high. Technically, we could find a way probably to spend 50 to 60% of that through what is qualified or considered restricted.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. I think you're worried, will we be able to spend it all in the restricted category? Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, good questions. Anybody else before we move on to expenditures? All right, moving on to expenditures. This is a snapshot of fiscal year 23, year we're in. We're at about 50% of our expenses going directly to personnel. 27% purchase services. Now that used to be about a 40-40 split, if you recall, a few years ago. But we brought back maintenance and custodial, which drove our blue ring larger. And purchase services dropped by $8 million when we went to fair funding, so it went the other way as well. So we're starting to see a bigger balance of what we're spending on staff now. We're starting to align more with traditional school districts because of what we did bring in-house and only having transportation outsourced at this point. The green, 16.4%, is benefits. That's one I'm most concerned about when I look at expenditures and the future of the cost of benefits. And then we have a little bit in supplies, capital, and others expenditures. And another way of looking at it by fiscal year for the 5 years of the forecast, you can see it's a pretty steady increase in the salaries and benefits from year 2023, 24, and then once we get to 25, it's hard to tell on here, but I did take the opportunity to go ahead and model the $2.5 million of suspended reductions that we voted on beginning for the 2022 year that we're using ESSER dollars for, to bring them back into the general fund. I felt we're healthy enough that I could reliably and respectfully do that. And of that $2.5 million, I want to say $1,012,000 or $1,002,000 was salaries and benefits. And then we had purchase services being the rest of that, and that's why you'll see a jump in purchase services in year 2025 as well. So we're still going to pay those out through ESSER dollars till we expire the ESSER dollars, and then we have the opportunity to bring them back into general fund if the board desires to vote and take those off suspension and reinstate them at a later date. But yeah, we see a steady flow of revenue, we see a steady flow of expenditures. Just looking at salaries, that's not yo, that's year over year up there on the right. Just didn't have enough room to write it all out. The red represents certified regular salaries, green certified, the red is classified, I'm sorry. The green is certified, the orange is administrative, and blue is other. And those numbers do skew a little bit, especially once we get to 25, and we bring some of those expenditures that I just talked about back into the mix here. And these are increases, by the way, year over year, not total amounts. It's your increases.
And how was that calculated? How did you determine what those increases would be?
Well, one thing that I did is obviously put the jobs back in if they were either classified or certified. And then I used my annual adjustment increase that I use every forecast period. And then I think I modeled in some, well, it's kind of built in the retirements and then the new hires that are replacing some of those folks. I mean, it's kind of a crazy looking picture here, but classified, you see so much red in 21 because that's where we brought custodians and maintenance back in. That's why that's so big. Same with 22, we're still hiring them coming in. And then, of course, that levels down a little bit, and then we see an increase because some of the staff we suspended were classified. All right, just looking at the annual percentage increases, this isn't talking about what I build in for raises. This is talking about what the increase is from FY22 to FY23, year-to-year increases, just looking at the average increase from year to year in the total amount being paid out. So it goes from 5.5, 518, 694, 716, and scales down a little bit to 709. That would include step increases as well, to answer your question, Chris.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, salaries by fiscal year, as you would assume, by cost of living increases, modeling each year. We're going to have annual increases, assuming we keep the same staff on. I have not built in for any additional staff, except for those that we talked about that were part of the $2.5 million reduction plan. And pretty steady all the way across. And the monetary increases, looking at it year over year. See a big jump here. That's where we brought in that $1.2 million that I mentioned earlier. And that is just salaries, that's not benefits. I'll go into benefits next for you. So if you're looking at spending $100 million in year 26, 27, that's 40% of salaries overall. All right, benefits is my biggest concern, year over year changes. Medical insurance rates, we got hit very hard this year in our insurance consortium. I had mentioned the amount of COVID cases that we had, well over industry standards, the amount of hospitalizations that we had, well over industry standards, the amount of high-cost claimants. Usually we had 10 to 12 high-cost claimants in a given year. we were at about 45, 46 this past year. And those are claimants costing $150,000 or more. Several of them went into the millions. So we got hit hard as a consortium. Now, the consortium, we insure just over 6,000 employees and 14 to 15,000 members altogether. So we're a large consortium. So all those claims I talked about was consortium-wide, not district. Thank God. We have a lot of vacancies with that many illnesses.
Is it proportional when you look at those numbers?
By district?
Yeah.
We, as a consortium, we don't dig into that. If somebody has a great year, all of a sudden they want to jump out of the consortium because they think they go get rates cheaper, so we kind of protect a lot of that information.
That answers my question.
Yeah, so we don't know. There's a few people that know, and even though I'm chair, I don't know. So, don't want to know. So, we got hit with a 17.9% insurance increase that actually begins in December for our employees because we start taking it out a month before the January increase. So everyone in the consortium is paying that 17.9% increase. Everyone gets the same rate change, except we have a few Dayton districts. They pay a premium because their hospitals are a lot more expensive up there. And then we have a few cities that pay a small premium on top of what we pay as well as part of the consortium and how it's laid out. But 17.9, I mentioned our carriers are talking about 15% increases in each of the next couple years, so they can get caught up. I guess COVID hurt them too. I scaled it down, and our insurance, even though I've got it up here on fiscal year, at 18% is just half of a fiscal year for us. So it's the second half of fiscal year 23 because it begins in January. So we pay January to June, and that 18% will be the first half of fiscal year 24. So I scale back fiscal year 24, knowing that half this 18 came into here. So it's actually, it's funny, but the math works. And again, not knowing what to do with the economy, I'm very conservative here. I've got 18, 15, 12, 10, and 10 on the insurance, hoping that it doesn't stay this sticky throughout the forecast. We average, golly, this consortium has been together 27 years, I believe. Do you ever remember any other insurance, Lori? It's been so long. And rarely do we ever go into double digits. We probably average 6% over the life of the insurance plan. And for us to be talking these kind of numbers is worrisome for me, for consortium. When I started in school funding 23 years ago, we were going through the same thing back then, and we said there's no way districts can sustain this. And they found ways to come in and reduce their plan benefits and get costs down year over year. I think employees became better consumers. Same conversations that we're starting again this year with employees. We want us to be better consumers as a consortium. Just because it's Sunday night, it's convenient to go to children's emergency room. Can't wait till Monday morning to get into our clinics or get to another primary doctor. Those are all conversations we're going to have. So even though I built these in, because we have the luxury of the revenue this time, that I can be a little more safe in these numbers, I'm hoping they're numbers that can be pulled back and they'll come to fruition. But I did want to model, because it could be worse. So I think I'm finding a happy medium here.
Is the plan consistent among all the districts? Or does the consortium determine all of the
Yes.
benefits?
We all have the same PPO plan, the same high deductible health plan. The only difference between districts is what the employees contribute. That's always a district decision. We're 80-20 here. Employer 80, employee 20%.
And it's by district, they can determine that, so
Yes.
if we see where we need to change those percentages, we would, okay.
Yeah, and those would be union.
Conversations.
discussions.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Am I correct in, is it a 65% increase in the life of this? If I add up all the percentages, it's 65%.
It'd actually be higher than that because it compounds.
It compounds?
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I'm hoping it doesn't come to fruition. We're gonna fight like hell. I felt comfortable building these in. Other districts have done the same thing. Some couldn't stomach it and didn't put those numbers in. Also because they didn't have revenue to support it either.
Do any of the districts within the consortium discuss leaving that group that would lessen the bargaining power based upon some of
We
these?
did have a couple that said they may have to look for options, but I haven't heard anybody take a serious move to go that route.
And if a district would leave, would it jeopardize would it give us less bargaining power and fluctuate our rates?
It depends how large the district is. We've got some small districts in there. When Lakota left, it had no effect whatsoever at that time. When Lakota left, I want to say 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And probably longer than that, I think it was before I got on the board, so it's 7 or 8 years, probably before you got there. And, but they may have been a district that had over 100% loss ratio, so it could have helped the group.
I got you.
Yeah, meaning they're using more than they're paying in, spending more. So, yeah, you just don't know.
You don't know. It might be good to bounce some people.
Maybe. We don't know who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I don't want to know.
Yeah.
Great question.
I follow.
Did that answer your question? Rowena?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Benefits by fiscal year. Here's the increases we're looking at by fiscal year. This is the number that matters. You know, percentages obviously drive this, but when you're looking at $1 million a year in increases, that's worrisome. That's about what we're averaging. Non-personnel, year over year. Year 2022, the big drop, that was the year purchase services came out with fair funding. 21, a little bit did during that year as well. And purchase services, again, is an area where you're buying labor. And a big concern that I have is, you know, how do I model that labor, knowing what labor is done, not just locally here, but nationally. So depending on the category, you've got all the details. If you dig deep enough, you can find that or I can share it with you. I made assumptions of 2 to 7.5% annual increases for purchase services, supplies, materials, capital outlay. A lot of different line items within each of those. So I didn't lay them all out. It'd been 10 different slides. But to give you an example, I don't want to put my cards on the table, but some of the higher personnel items got a 5 or 7.5% increase. I made that assumption for the next 2 years, and then I backed those assumptions down in the last 2 years to a 2 to 5%, depending where the categories were. Just knowing what's been happening out there and seeing how some of these contracts are coming in with increases on them. And a lot of the personnel contracts, and really, I'll speak to you on this, we have our educational service centers, Butler County, Warren County, Hamilton County. We even do some in Montgomery County and sometimes Preble County. Those are the people we're hiring to come in. We've got Peterman, our bus services, transportation, people coming in. Food service really is out of this because they run in their own fund and they're self-supported. But we are seeing a lot of these contracts come in larger each year. Again, I took a conservative model here because we could afford it. Hopefully we can back these numbers down if it's warranted. And when you're looking on personnel, 21 to 22, there's your drop, and then again, we see steady increases for inflationary costs through the forecast period. I will tell you, I think I wrote it in here, yeah, this includes $500,000 that I added for student and staff devices, computers, starting in year 2025, because we've been able to use ESSER dollars to purchase those items. Been fortunate there. Added in $800,000 for the cut bus route that we had in the reduction plan. And then we also took out half of the nursing services for $375,000. So those are built back in 2025 under purchase services.
What happened with the nursing services?
We didn't cut the positions, we suspended the positions, and we just decided if we had to make cuts, we'd go to one nurse every 2 buildings. But by suspending them, obviously, they all stayed, but we took half their expenses and charged it to the ESSER funds. The other half stayed in the general fund. So now I'll be putting the other half back in 2025, assuming the board reinstates those positions. Good question. And there they are. They're currently paid out of ESSER funds. And again, those will continue this year, next year, out of those ESSER funds. I will tell you, I was on a call with Springboro Schools, and they are about 400 students less than we are, so comparably the same size district. And when they were talking about their $4 million they received in ESSER dollars, treasurer happened to ask how much we received in ESSER dollars, and I felt a little guilty telling her $42 million. So we have been very blessed to have those ESSER dollars to be able to relieve our general fund, take some heat off of it, and be able to provide the added services that our students were needing for learning loss. So we have been fortunate. That's why we're seeing so much change in this forecast. There's your total expenditures year over year, and there's all the different line items. And total expenditures by fiscal year, and again, we get it up into the $100 million range in 2026 and 2027. Forecast summary, unless there's more questions on expenditures. All right, coming in, state aid is working in our favor. Total forecast revenue will increase by $35.3 million in the next 5 years because of that fair funding. It's pretty much on the backs of that state aid. Annual revenue increases will help maintain current services while supporting inflationary factors. And there's our changes year over year in revenue. General fund expenditures have been reduced by the use of federal ESSER grant funds by nearly $9 million today. So we've been able, this is a bad word, but ESSER allows it, supplant our expenditures from the general fund to the ESSER. And we've taken just about every opportunity we thought of to be able to do that. The ESSER funds have allowed us to maintain staff that were being reduced and hire an additional 100+ staff, all while reducing our general fund obligations. Not too many districts can say they were able to do that. I think you said 120 today?
And when the ESSER funds are exhausted?
They're not exhausted yet. They'll be exhausted at the end of 2024. So we've got this fiscal year, next fiscal year. I'll dig into them. Marlon and I just made an agreement today. Once we're done paying out December, we close the books. I want to take a look at them and see how we're doing with ESSER 3. ESSER 3 was the $28 million batch that we got. We're done spending ESSER 1. That's $2.1 million, if I remember correctly. $10.8 million was ESSER 2. That's about gone. Now we're just on the ESSER 3 batch to see how we're doing with what we had estimated, with all the staff that we hired, all the supplies that we purchased, everything that we needed. Are we spending those dollars, or are we behind? I can tell you that we do also have a fallback. All that money will be spent because we can spend it on a lot of building repairs that need to be done with ventilation, chillers, roofs, all that qualifies too. So we're not going to send any money back.
But I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. So my question is, what happens with the staff that we have hired
Great question.
when the
Yeah.
ESSER funds are exhausted?
Yeah, when we hired the staff, we hired them for 2 years.
So they're-
And they knew that coming in the door.
Contract?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And, you know, to be honest and candid, when we're looking at the carryover that we have, we'll have some options. Not to say that we can keep everybody. That's not an option. I've modeled that. I started there. You know, way too many employees couldn't do it. But we will have opportunities that if we need to extend some of those services to help other kids get caught up and we find beneficial positions that are really doing that, we're going to have opportunities to be able to take advantage of that during this forecast period.
Thank you.
You asked it the right way that time. All right, you can see our surplus year after year. We go back to 2020. I remember that. We were about $2 million in deficit spending. We worked really hard in 21, 22. That's why we were making those reductions of $2.5 million. 21, we finished the year with just over 700,000. 2022, I was sweating all the way through June 30th. We ended up with about $139,000. And it looks like in 2023, we'll end up just under $3 million, and we could have $10 million or better in 2024. 2026, it drops quite a bit. 2027, there's the next spending shortfall that we could see during this forecast period, but not to worry. Again, a lot can change between now and then. Just dropping 2% off some of those insurances for the last couple of years could make that difference. But here's the good news. Got your head spinning like you had mine spinning. This is our general fund cash balances. And 20 million, and in Berlina, we have a 10% rule policy that says we have to maintain 10% carryover of our expenditures for a given year. So if I look out 5 years and we're spending 100 million, we have to have 10 million in carryover. We've been healthy all the way through these years, maintaining about 20% or better carryover. And again, we're going to get up in the 40% range up here. And even with deficit spending, it just drops us down to about 43.5 million. So we can do a lot without reducing all that staff if we need to use it for another year, 2 to 3 years, whatever that may be. We've got enough funds there that we can spend down. Marlon about dropped when he said, spend more from deficit spending? Treasurers don't say that. No, we don't. But when you have a carryover like that and your kids have needs, I hold on to the carryover. It's there for the students. As long as we're maintaining, to me, a healthy balance is 20%. And always like to maintain that. If I'm ever down to 10, I
Get a little nervous.
Yeah.
Is the community center project factored into these numbers?
No.
And so any personnel, staffing, anything within the community center is not?
That's correct. If we wanted to add busing, that had to be added into this. If we want to bus kids to the center after school every day, if we start doing preschool busing, we'd have to factor.
Have you forecasted anything in regards to what the cost could be with staffing and busing, any of those things for the community center?
I have not yet. Oops. Any other questions?
You know, the, in 2022, that's the year we did the cuts, right?
Yes.
And so that's the lowest, that was, our expenditures were 72 million that year.
Yes.
And is it, and then by 2027, we're up to 110 million. Is that an unusual jump for that number of years? I mean, it's a steady, it's not all of a sudden, it's just a steady slope, but
It's
it's
healthy. By going up, and I showed you salaries, we're going up 5, 6, 7%. That's not unusual, depending on steps, depending on degrees. If you've got over staff, a 3.5% step increase for somebody that's making 80,000 compared to 40,000,
Yeah.
obviously twice as much money
Okay.
for that step increase.
So that's a factor in why it's
Yes.
such, it's not exactly a jump, it's just a steady increase, but it's a big amount.
And, I did really put some big numbers in for inflationary expectations. We're still near 8% year over year for inflation. And, and right now it seems sticky, meaning it could be around for a while. So I did want to factor it in, build it in. It's easier to take it out than to put it in later if you don't have the revenue.
So am I right in saying, and it's always nice within these forecasts to indicate that there's no levy that would be needed within our current 5-year forecast?
Thank you. No levy.
No levy.
Unless, again, something would happen
Unforeseen.
between now and the biennium budget.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'll just make one comment. I appreciate the transparency. I know by law that you're required to do this and required to be transparent, but you can always kind of hide things and not be as transparent as you need to be. But I appreciate allowing the community, staff, us, a picture in, whether it's good news, bad news, indifferent. I think it's important for people to realize that we're strong fiscal stewards and that we're careful and that our staff understands that, yeah, that we're solvent and so forth. And so I appreciate the work that's gone into it. And from the beginning, like when we first, many of us started on the Board of Education to now, the diagrams, the explanation, I think, has improved incrementally over that time, and appreciate it. It's easy to kind of take it in.
Thank you. I was smiling ear to ear this morning when I shared this with Cabinet. Just great news, knowing where we are and the union to work with us all the way through it as well. They've been as patient as can be with us as we've worked through it. It's just nice knowing that things are working out as we planned. And you're right, good point, Kathy, at $2.5 million, that would have been a huge deficit spend there had we not made that reduction. Yeah. Anyone else with questions?
How do we share this with the community, or is this the share?
Well, I will post this PowerPoint, definitely. If people want to look at it, they can. I will also post, I gave you a lot more specifics in the assumptions. It's the green one right there. Yeah, that's got a lot of detail in there. That will be posted on board docs as well, and the public can get to that information. It's out there, and as soon as we get somebody to take over for Liz Beadle, we'll have it posted on the website.
That's good, because this is celebratory. It's good news that we should definitely be sharing it, because we are very vocal when we do need a levy to pass about our situation. I hope that we're just as vocal about this is like really great news.
I know the spending history for the last 20 years, 26 years, from before it started here many years ago. And Verlena, you're probably the luckiest board member that we've had in those 26 years to come in when you did.
Yeah, I remember some of the financial challenges, so that's why I'm like, this is
Yes.
very good news.
Yes. So, and my question to you is, how do you like these apples?
Nice. Yep. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? I know there's a motion on the floor on the table, I don't know where it is, but it's out here somewhere.
Let me switch screens to Chris.
All right, we'll give you a second. Catch your breath.
I'm ready.
All right, if there are no questions, I think we're ready to vote.
All right, Dr. Urso,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber,
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mulligan.
Yes.
All right, that takes us to committee reports. Mr. Stiles, any committees?
We've not had any committees meet since our last board meeting.
Super. Do we want to discuss in terms of the Community Center Planning Committee? I know, Ms. Stewart, you attended our last meeting. Is this an appropriate time to make that more permanent? I make a recommendation to add Ms. Verlena Stewart to the committee for the community center.
Okay.
Is there a motion? Does it
So
need to be a
moved.
motion? Mr.
Yes, so we're talking about one of the board committees, being the Community Center Planning Committee, with Ms. Novak vacating her seat. It left a representative from the Board of Education sitting on the board's committee, joint committee with the City Council. So one of the conversations we've had is how do we fill that seat and have representation in the committee as well. Dr. Urso tonight is bringing up the idea of filling that spot so we have full board representation on the committee.
I don't want to put Ms. Stewart on the spot if she's not interested in serving in that capacity, but would love to have her be a part of those conversations, as I think she has the most intimate understanding of the community center of anyone sitting here.
I would be happy to serve.
Thank
So,
you.
Mr. Bertram,
need
do
a
we take
second.
a motion and a second?
You motioned, and I thought I heard a second.
I'll second.
Right, there's a second.
I motioned.
Oh, you motioned?
All right. Are there any questions in regards to that? Then Mr. Bertram?
All right, and we'll go with, let's see, Chris. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
Be a good time to give an update on the last committee meeting.
Yes, we met, was that last Thursday or the Thursday before?
Thursday before.
All right, we did meet on the Thursday before, and you can chime in and add anything that maybe I neglect. But the Boys and Girls Club had representatives there to discuss possibly having a partnership with CBI and to operate a Boys and Girls Club out of the community center. The Westchester group was in attendance. Damon, I forget Damon's last name, really sharp young man who spoke, and a gentleman drove in from Tennessee for the day, and one of their board members also attended and gave what I thought was a good presentation on how they operate within Westchester and how that would possibly apply here in Middletown. There are conversations on just how that would work with CBI. Would there be an overlap of services? Is there common ground? And I believe we left that as CBI and the Boys and Girls Club were going to meet and talk. And I believe there's a meeting tentatively scheduled here in the next couple of weeks to do just that. We also discussed different kind of plans in regards to the building itself, the positioning of the new preschool addition, and the possibility of where a gym would go also. And looking out on the, I'm awful, is that 63 right there? I've lived in Middletown my entire life.
Route 4.
Route 4, see, I'm
Yeah.
awful on those kinds of roads. I just know I drive by it every day. And so on Route 4, where it faces the road, the one thought would be to have the preschool kind of where it would be a nice sight line for the road with the gymnasium. And it kind of looked like Tetris in terms of how they were moving the building around. But I think those renditions over the next couple weeks and months will come out and the public will be able to view that. The exciting piece, if you're interested, I believe it's on Thursday of this week, there is a scheduled visit for anyone who would, and I would encourage anyone here to visit the Boys and Girls Club in Westchester. I believe 1 o'clock. I got an agenda today. It said 1 o'clock was the initial thing, and then at 2, there was some other things going on, and then it ends around 3. But I'll look at it. I can forward it on to you. I just got it this
It was on
afternoon.
my calendar.
Damon sent me.
You did send an email,
Yeah, I forwarded one to you, or Damon attached one to you, the gentleman from the Westchester Boys and Girls Club. And so, yeah, if there's interest in visiting that site and seeing what they do, and the facilities, I guess, are new and nice, and how that could be an appropriate partnership for us in Middletown. Ms. Stewart, you were part of that conversation too. Anything to add?
Just that I think the conversation with Boys and Girls Club is promising. They have access to training resources and development resources that would be very helpful. We are meeting with them on the 2nd to have more, December 2nd, to have some more conversation. There were a lot more questions that came up than answers, but I'm really excited about furthering that conversation and seeing if there's if we can create a partnership with them. I think there's a lot of promise there. The expansion, I think some of the renderings, a couple of the renderings looked really well. I'd like to take a deeper look and see exactly what that, it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more to see exactly what that's going to look like. But yeah, I'm comfortable with the progress we're making and looking forward to the discussion with Boys and Girls Club.
And on your one point, I think the Boys and Girls Club have ESSER dollars to spend in regards to, and one of their big priorities is to increase in communities like Middletown. And Middletown had been brought up in some of their meetings prior to meeting with us directly. And so it's promising to think that they would have some operating expenses that would cover
Programming specifically.
the programming expenditures for up to the first couple years. And so it really reduces the risk and also allows us to kind of jump and leap into an opportunity with that.
If there were no ESSER monies and we had to support it, or after the ESSER money is spent, is it maintained through dues or memberships, or how is it generally maintained?
There are different iterations. Like they talked about, they have large businesses that donate a steady stream of revenues. They had they discussed it within the meeting. It was like a pie chart, and it was like almost split 30-30-30 between different contributors. They do events, golf events and other events that fill that void. And then they had smaller donations. But they used the example that Cleveland Cliffs is a big partner for their Lakota Westchester branch, and them being a community, Middletown community business, that there would be natural partnerships to help sustain it.
So, and they don't charge any membership fees there?
I think they had explained at
do.
one time it was like $100, or it was a nominal fee, and then they have people who support those fees for young
Okay.
folks that can't support it themselves.
They have a sliding scale that they use for their students, members. And it's nominal, as Chris had mentioned, and it's not a lot to do with sustainability, but more of a partnership with the family, so they care for the facility since they've got some skin in the game.
Yeah, I think it's more of an investment so that they feel like they're invested in the center. I don't think by any means it sustains cost or overhead,
Yep.
but it does create some ownership and investment.
And that's something each club, each entity can decide on their own if they want to charge or not.
So it might be similar to, for funding or money, junior achievement or those groups?
Yes.
The last thing I would say is we did have conversations around a gymnasium. I know our current budget is it's strained in regards to having a gymnasium at that site. I would like to thank our treasurer, Mr. Bertram, for actively looking for creative ways to bridge that gap. And I'm more hopeful today than I was maybe a month ago that that gap can be filled in regards to, I think we have around anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million, maybe a little bit more gap between what we currently have in the budget and what it would require to have a gymnasium on that site, which I think I'm pretty vocal within those meetings, arguing that for it to truly be a community center, to fully support programming for CBI and potentially the Boys and Girls Club, to have an appropriate gymnasium space would be
Absolutely. No sense
absolutely
to be
critical
Yeah.
within it.
I'd agree. I would agree.
Hey, just one thing, just for comfort for the board. I know, Mr. Moore, you brought this up several times. The big move now, once we start getting past the exterior and the landscape of the new campus, is really getting into the interior design. So I know we put $4 million on the table. Our senior directors, Mr. Satsing and Mrs. Davis, will be at the table with our architects, really making sure the design of the interior space really meets the requirements we're required to meet as far as guidelines for preschool space. So meetings are being scheduled with architects to talk about what that space might sound, look, and feel like. And then is there an opportunity for them to dream up how it can be dual usage outside the preschool time? So just more comfort, just to follow up on the point that you brought up in the past.
Any questions? Don't want to take your entire night away. If there's nothing else in terms of board, within committee reports, any board reports? Mr. Moore, anything to report this evening?
I do. I missed the last meeting when Mrs. Stewart was sworn in, so I want to officially say congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And look forward to working with you. Had to be out of town for work. That I wish I could have been here, but congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Also, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. We won't be here next week, so we're going to be on Thanksgiving break. I know I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving, so hope our students and our staff and everyone have a great Thanksgiving and be safe.
Thank you. Anything, Ms. Scheibert, this evening?
Yes, Mrs. Mulligan and I attended the job, it wasn't called a job fair. Jobs are fun. Was that what it was?
It was called,
At Mayfield. It was wonderful. What an opportunity for those kids. It was so organized, so well thought out, and the staff seemed to take a lot of time to focus on what the kids were really interested in, their top areas. And the people they had there were amazing. There were some really interesting conversations, and the kids asked good questions. It was just a nice piece to see in school. It really was.
Thank you. Ms. Stewart, anything this evening?
Just if you all aren't doing anything this Saturday, CBI is having a turkey trot. It'll be 35 degrees, but folks will be out there running around Smith Park, and we'd love to have you. It starts at 10 o'clock, and it goes until you finish the race. It's only 3 miles, so it should be a lot of fun. And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Ms. Mulligan?
I think my trotting days are over. But I did it, like Anita said, enjoyed the variety at Mayfield School. I touched a chicken. And they had somebody there, just these entrepreneurial people who set up a business and get it going. And then they share that journey with the kids. And the kids were so engaged in listening to the people. It was kind of gratifying to see that. Maybe they were just told that to be good, but they were, whether it was just their nature or the heavy-handed, or there was heavy-handed intervention, but it went very well. I'd encourage them to keep that up. So congratulations, Mayfield. Well done.
Thank you. I would like to congratulate our band for a superior rating at their big event for the year. I know they work extremely hard, and we have a phenomenal music department. And then to be recognized outside of Middletown, I think it's been a string of many years that they've been able to, is it 20 years that they've been able to secure that rating, which, I mean, is something, and it's significant.
Has Mr. Lice been with us for all those
Has he?
years?
I don't know. It's a good question.
When you wrote it?
I also attended the Fall Awards, and it was nice to see so many young folks and their families attend. And there was a huge line of young folks who both academically and athletically just really excelled in the fall. I know we had 2 cross-country runners, Bree Boyle for the women's team and Curtis Fowler for the men's team, that really did exceptionally well over the season. Wanted to congratulate them. And I think just the other day I saw where Ronan Casanova on our football team was first team all-district. Lamont Chambers was second team all-district. And Majaden Lewis is second team, and I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis, I probably butchered your first name. Regardless, huge in regards. I know they worked really, really hard, as did a lot of other folks on the field, and they really did have a good season this year. And lastly, I'd just like to recognize J.D. Vance on a win for being a senator. Not many high schools in the state of Ohio can say they have a U.S. senator who attended their high school. And wish him the absolute best as he represents Middletown, the state of Ohio, in Washington, D.C.
Another Middie to add to that big list of Middies who've been
Yeah,
famous for doing great things.
yeah, absolutely. So that's all I have tonight.
Don't have a lot. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I will say I'm looking forward to my wife and I getting away for a week during Thanksgiving week. We're going to try cruising once again, and hopefully we come back healthy and ready to work in December. So looking forward to it.
I just want to share just a couple things. We are scheduled to celebrate the Middletown High School Marching Band at our board meeting in December. We had it kind of lined up for tonight, but due to some scheduling conflicts, we decided to reschedule. But Mr. Lyson and the whole crew will be here, so bring your energy, bring some excitement. Really looking forward to loving up on our marching band here in December.
Great.
Also want to share, you felt the impact of the legislative work of different leaders and school board members throughout the state of Ohio tonight in the 5-year forecast, right? You heard Mr. Bertram refer to the impact of fair school funding on our 5-year forecast several times throughout his presentation. For our board, our staff, our community, advocacy means the world to opportunities for our students. So although we have enjoyed 2 years, the first phase of the three-phase fair school funding model, there still is more advocacy work that needs to be done across the state of Ohio with our current and newly elected officials. So any effort that we could rally across Southwest Ohio to advocate for fair school funding, not the backpack bill, but fair school funding so that our students continue to get opportunities would be the call to action that I would make a plea for tonight. You got to see the efforts of the last 2 some odd years worth of advocacy present tonight. If we are successful in the last 2 phases of fair school funding, you can imagine the impact that would have in opportunities academically, social, emotionally, and in life for our children here in Middletown. So to anyone listening, anyone watching, buzz your newly elected officials, whether they've been in the seat or they just got in the seat or it's their first day, first month. Any pressure we can put on them for fair school funding is much needed. And lastly, I'll just close out. I get a call several times throughout this weekend. Phone buzzes for different reasons, but yesterday, midday, I get a call from Randall Bertram, and he's just excited as all can be. But I just want to highlight his work ethic. Behind the scenes, I don't think too many people know how hard the gentleman works. The Saturdays, Sundays, he's putting in work to get prepared for 5-year forecasts, always doing what's best for kids, but finding a way fiscally to support opportunities for kids. I stack him up against any treasurer across this country. Just what he does and what he believes in as far as kid opportunities goes unrivaled. So just proud of you. Really appreciate you being on the team. I know I gave you a hard time about your passion for Ohio State and Michigan football. That will work itself out. But tonight you got to see his leadership live on display, and he's doing a lot of great things for our kids behind the scenes.
If I could just add one thing, Marlon. Working with you makes it easy as well. You do a great job. And my wife and I did get a new dog. We rescued a little Shih Tzu Maltese dog, and we've had him about 2 weeks now. And his name is Buckeye.
Oh, cute.
Buckeye Boo. And a funny story behind that. I'll share it with you. When my wife told me about him, I said, "What's his name?" He said, "You're not gonna like it." I said, "What's his name?" His name's Blue. I said, "Can't have it. Can't have it." He has one blue eye, one brown eye. Got the name Blue. So,
How old is Buckeye?
so 3. Yeah, cute little dog.
On that note, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
We're adjourned.
That's a good meeting.